Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Rhianna. It's really nice to have you here. And I've got an exciting video to do today because I recently finished all 6 books that were shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2026. And today I'm going to talk about my thoughts on each one and also talk about them in order from my least favourite to my favourite, because unfortunately I didn't love all of the books on the shortlist. I would say there was one that I really didn't like. There were 3 that I found pretty good, and there were 2 that I thought were excellent pieces of fiction. The first book I'd like to talk about is Kingfisher by Rozie Kelly. This is my least favourite book on the shortlist, and unfortunately this book just didn't really work for me. I did only read around 30% of the book because I decided 30% of the way in that life's too short to read books that you're not really enjoying. And because I didn't finish it, I'm not going to give it a rating, but I am going to talk a little bit about why the book didn't work for me. So firstly, I felt that the central obsession wasn't really earned. So this story is about a gay man who kind of randomly becomes infatuated by a woman who is 17 years older than him. And I couldn't really understand why he had this infatuation. And I do think that was kind of the point. I think the writer is looking at why we fall in love with the people that we do, and perhaps asking the question, is it random or is there a reason? And I do somewhat agree with the hypothesis that love can be random, but I think in my fiction I prefer there to be a clear reason so I can just understand why the characters are doing what they're doing. Furthermore, I didn't really gel with the writing style. The writing isn't really that poetic. It has quite a blatant modern realism, which I think is quite trendy for literary fiction books to employ nowadays. And it's something that sometimes works for me and sometimes doesn't. And in this case, it just didn't work for me. I think it's because I didn't really like the main character either. They felt quite self-absorbed. Also, another thing to add, the main character teaches creative writing, and I'm aware that Rozie Kelly also studied creative writing. And I did feel a little bit like this was a creative writing project. I felt very aware of what the writer was doing. I could almost see her inspirations, and as a consequence it really took me out of it. Like, it's almost like watching a magician but being aware of all the tricks that they're doing and not really even enjoying the tricks anyway. I was also quite sad that I didn't enjoy this because I do enjoy stories that centre around queer characters. I really enjoyed The Safekeep that was the winner last year. That was one of my favourite books of the year, and I don't like dwelling too long on the books that I didn't like. So let's move on. Next, I want to talk about The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson. So firstly, this book really did surprise me. I went into all of these books not really knowing very much at all, because I love entering books without any knowledge of where I'm going. I love being surprised by the location and the characters and the plot. And I was surprised to find that this book was set in Bradford, because I don't think I've read a book set in Bradford before, so that was a nice surprise. And in the prologue are introduced to Mercy, who is in the womb of her mother, and the prologue is her entering the world and being born. The story then follows Mercy as she grows up in Bradford, and it follows her until she's about 11. And Mercy is part of a Jamaican family. They are part of the Windrush generation, so the novel is set in around the 1960s. And one of the main lessons Mercy has to learn is to detach herself from her mother, in that she feels very attached to her as she's growing. She mentions that she feels like the umbilical cord is still attached. And I enjoyed the character of Mercy. I thought she felt very distinct. She reminded me a bit of Matilda. She really enjoys to read. But my main issue that I had with this book is that I just found it very simple. As we are hearing from the child of Mercy, and the story is told entirely through her perspective, she's not going to have the widest vocabulary. She's not going to be the smartest of people. She is a child. But I found her voice a little bit too simple and repetitive at times. I'll give you an example of the writing style. Mercy can't leave by herself because she's only 4 and she doesn't have any bus fare and she doesn't know where to go. But Mummy is big people and big people know everything. Mummy must know where to go. Mercy looks at Mummy, and so on. Also, I found the overall messaging of the story quite obvious and done in quite a telling way. So at the end of the book, it says she spent her whole life trying to save Mummy. It didn't work, so now she has to save herself. And that's quite a sweet, genuine lesson to learn. It's quite a sweet, genuine quote, but it just felt quite simple. But it was quite a sweet story, a good 3-star read, I think. Next, I want to talk about Heart the Lover by Lily King. This story is a story of 2 parts. In the first part, we are following a young woman in her early 20s, I believe, and she is at university and she has some friends and some relationships. She has a relationship with a man called Sam and a man called Yash. Then halfway through, it's quite a severe time jump because she's then like 20 years older, I think, and she has 2 children. She's married to a man called Silas, and I don't want to say more because that would be spoilers, but the central themes are relationships and how we can regret things and how everyone's going to die in the end. And I think that final theme that is explored, that is everyone is going to die in the end, is why I didn't love this book, because I think about death a lot and I read as an antidote to that feeling. This instead was more like a poison. And yeah, I think maybe if you don't think about those things a lot and you take life for granted a little bit, you might gain a lot from this book because it might remind you that nothing is permanent and you need to appreciate every day because you never know what tomorrow brings. But I'm like constantly aware of that to my own detriment. So this book, it just reminded me of that fact. And so yeah, that's all I really want to say about this book. I do think that it was well written. I did enjoy the time jump. I believed the characters' relationships, but I think it's another good 3 out of 5 star read. Next, I want to talk about Dominion by Addie E. Citchens. This is a Southern Gothic novel about the dominion of religion and men, and it's told through the perspective of 2 women. One is a mother named Priscilla, and one is a young woman named Diamond. And I thought it was very skillfully done. It very skillfully explored themes of religion and themes of patriarchy without hitting you over the head with it. I think the theme of religion and patriarchy are best explored in fiction through character and through showing how the characters react to those things. And that is exactly what the writer did. And I really appreciate, sorry, I was just coughing because I look like I'm crying. I'm okay. I appreciated how the novel looked how the patriarchy can crush us under its doctrine. But I did feel a bit exhausted by the end of the book because the characters of Priscilla and Diamond are really great characters, but a lot of their lives are controlled by the men around them, and a lot of their decisions in the book as a consequence revolve around the men around them. And I guess that was kind of the point. Yeah, I don't know, sometimes reading books where the characters are just kind of, they experience a lot of negative things and they struggle to have their own autonomy, sometimes is just a bit sad, I guess. And yeah, I thought this was a good family drama that explored some important themes, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we're on to the 2 books that I really, really loved. So first is Flashlight by Susan Choi. I loved this book. This book is about a father who is on a beach with his daughter, and he goes missing on this beach. And the daughter is very young. She is like 9 years old, so she doesn't really remember what happened to him, and it's presumed by the authorities that he drowned in the sea. And that is the opening prologue, and the whole novel centres around that moment on the beach and what happened to the father. And we follow that father, whose name is Cirque, and his wife, whose name is Anne, and their daughter, whose name is Louisa. And we follow them before this event where Cirque went missing on the beach, and also after this event. So the novel spans decades. And the main themes of the novel are how the past affects us and about memory. And it's also looking at a political issue that I knew very little about, and I liked how it revealed to me that this thing is going on in the world. And I've heard some people say that they felt that the book dragged in the middle when Louisa goes to university, for example, but I actually really enjoyed those moments because when Louisa is at university, you see how her childhood affects her in her adult life. And this novel is also written incredibly. I think it's the best written book on the list. The use of vocabulary is fantastic. It felt like the writer Susan Choi really thought about every word that they used. Also, it's a bit of a literary thriller, and especially near the end, there is a chapter that is just really dramatic. I was on the edge of my seat, and it's probably the most like edge of my seat that I've been reading a book this year. And I do think this is a 5-star read for me. I loved this. And now my favourite book in the shortlist of the Women's Prize of Fiction, and my personal winner is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is a novel written entirely through letters, and the main character is Sybil Van Antwerp, and she is a 70-something-year-old, and she writes letters to various people and they also respond to her. And so we're not just seeing her letters, we're seeing letters that are being written to her as well. And for me, this book was a homage to letter writing. I did write a letter as a consequence of reading this book, and what I love about that is often we read books and, you know, it's an enjoyable experience and then we continue with our lives. I liked how this book made me do something in my real life. And yet Sybil writes to so many different people. I started making a list. She has an ongoing dispute with the Dean of the University of Maryland. She writes to a customer service worker at Kindred Project, which is a DNA service. She writes to her family members. She writes to Harry, who is an autistic teenage boy, the son of a previous colleague. She also writes to other writers. She writes to Kazuo Ishiguro, to Diana Gabaldon, to Joan Didion, and the letters that she writes to those writers I found just quite funny, because she's not afraid to be honest. Like, she'll say if she didn't really like a book that she read by them. And I love how when you're reading these letters, you're piecing together the main character's life. Like Sybil, we never see her outside of these letters, but you really come to understand her just through the letters that she's written. And I would imagine that it's really hard to plot a novel like this because it's just letters, but the novel is so well plotted. Things at the end feel dramatic and feel like a climax. I ended up crying at the end like a little baby, so. The book is also very funny. A quote I liked was, "He takes himself to therapy twice a week. Harry, not the dog." So yeah, that's my personal winner, The Correspondent. Now, what do I think will actually win the Women's Prize of Fiction? I think it will be The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I think this book is the book that has the most universal appeal, to be honest. I think anyone who reads this book will enjoy it. And so I think it has the highest chance of being loved by the majority of people. I think that's a good book to choose as a winner, because the chances are that a lot of people will read the winner of the Women's Prize of Fiction because it wins. And so I think like, if you pick something that's a bit more divisive, then like you're gonna have less people enjoying the book. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. What did you think of the shortlist if you've read it, or of any of these books if you've read them? I'd love to talk to you in the comments, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye bye.